In today's video, we're going to take a look at which triangle towns are increasing in value and which are decreasing. Out of 15 cities in the triangle, 5 of them had both month-over-month and year-over-year property value increases, and 4 towns had median value decreases in both month-over-month and year-over-year values. We're also going to look at which towns had the most competing offers and how likely it is that you're going to encounter competing offers wherever you're planning to make an offer. A lot of the price fluctuations have to do with the availability of housing. The more inventory there is, the less likely the area is to increase in value. Towns where there's very little land available to build on, generally speaking, have more appreciation, but as you'll see, that doesn't always hold true. We're definitely going to see some rule breakers, and I'll dig into the details to show you some reasons those areas didn't follow those basic economic principles. Something else to keep in mind is that areas that saw decreases in value doesn't necessarily mean that individual properties are decreasing. It can mean that in certain situations, but here's a great example of what I mean. My daughter bought a home last year in a brand new subdivision. This year, there's still significant construction happening in her neighborhood. However, because of market conditions, the builder has shifted the product they're building. The median home price in the neighborhood this spring is 4.7% lower than it was last spring, but the median size of the homes being built has also decreased by 18%. Last year, they were building homes that were just under 2,200 square feet. Now what they're building is just under 1,800. All that to say that while this data does tell us something, it's generalized information, and if you want specific information about an area that you're considering buying in or selling in, you need to call me so I can pull specific data in your area. Now let's look at the data. First, we're going to look at the areas that increased, and then we'll look at the areas that decreased. There were 5 cities that had median value increases both month over month and year over year. They are Raleigh, Cary, Garner, Zebulon, and Chapel Hill. Raleigh had a 1% annual increase and a 3% monthly increase. Cary had an 8% yearly increase and a 14% monthly increase. Garner had a 10% annual and 9% monthly increase. Zebulon had a 1% annual and an 8% monthly increase. And Chapel Hill had a 13% annual and a 5% monthly increase. Now, we expect cities like Raleigh, Cary, and Chapel Hill to increase, and even though Garner isn't the most popular suburb, which we'll get to in a minute, I expect continual increases in Garner as well because, all right, here's the deal with Garner. It is a totally different situation than anywhere else. Garner's location is so incredibly valuable. Look at this. It's 5 miles from downtown Raleigh. It's genuinely the closest suburb you can be if you want to have easy access to downtown and not actually live downtown. What's really weird about Garner is it still hasn't created any kind of interesting or significant commercial development. There's big box stores and that's about it. Garner is almost exactly the same distance from downtown as North Hills is, and yet where's all the development? They have a little downtown right here, and they have White Oak Crossing, which is on the south side of Garner, which provides big box shopping for both Garner and Clayton, but they don't have any kind of upscale shopping or restaurants that a town in this location should have, but it's coming. John Kane's downtown south development is still in downtown Raleigh, but in an area that's underdeveloped, which is bringing the bougie stuff just a little bit closer to Garner, and I think once that south side starts to develop, it'll have an effect on Garner. I'm being honest, I have no idea why Garner doesn't do more with their insanely valuable location. I just don't get it. Knightdale's developing, Wendell is developing, heck, even Clayton out in the boonies is developing. Just kidding. I love me some Clayton. If you live in Garner or you've heard about something happening out there, please comment down below because I really need to know what's happening. It's about time we get that ball rolling. That was a pretty big detour from the script. My point with the whole diatribe is that we expect Raleigh, Cary, Chapel Hill, and Garner to appreciate, but Zebulon threw me for a bit of a loop. I wasn't expecting that, but it wasn't a huge appreciation. It was just 1%, but it was appreciation and it was unexpected given how much raw land there is to develop in Zebulon. But sometimes you can find a reason if you dig into it enough. I looked a little closer and found that in 2022, 42% of Zebulon's home sales were new construction, but in 2023, 66% of Zebulon's home sales were new construction. That's a pretty big jump. New construction costs more than an existing home, so even though there is more inventory than every other area that appreciated, shifting to a higher percentage of new construction can also make the median price higher. That's a pretty good explanation. It's also a good example of why simply looking at the median home price has its limitations when comparing year-over-year growth, but it's the best we've got. Now let's look at the losers. we're going to look at all the towns that depreciated in May compared to the same time last year. These are areas where you might pick up a deal or avoid most multiple offer situations if you'd rather not get into that, although they're happening in all towns, just much less in these areas that depreciated. But before we look at that, if you're thinking of moving to the Raleigh area or you already live here and you're ready to buy or sell a house, feel free to give me a call, text, or email. My team would love to help you. There were 6 towns that had year-over-year depreciations. I'm not really going to talk about the month-over-month because, being totally honest, there's not a lot of value in discussing that. Prices go up and down by month all the time. The annual numbers are what really mean something. If you have several months decrease in a row, that does give you an idea of where the year might be headed. Anyway, we did have a couple of outliers in the decreasing category. Morrisville decreased 2%. Holly Springs decreased 3%. Clayton decreased 8% year over year. Wendell decreased 4%. Wake Forest had an 8% annual decrease, but also an 8% month-over-month increase, so you can see how quickly that annual decrease can turn around, and Durham decreased 1% year over year. Now let's talk about those outliers. Why are we seeing decreases in areas that are pretty densely populated and don't have a lot of room for development, like Morrisville? Honestly, it's not that surprising. In all the other towns, they have lots of room for growth, which means builders can build plenty of homes, which means pricing doesn't have that upward pressure. But in Morrisville, that's not the case. So why did Morrisville's values decrease? It's actually a pretty simple explanation. Last year, the median size of a home was 2,310 square feet. This year, it was 2,189 square feet. That's a 6% decrease in size, but Morrisville only had a 2% decrease in median price. What that means is people simply bought cheaper homes in Morrisville this year, probably because of the interest rates. When comparing homes of the same size, there was probably still a price appreciation. There are still other variables that need to be considered to find out if that is true, though. You can't just do a straight price per square foot comparison because some homes have more expensive features. You wouldn't compare a home with a pool, a big screened porch, and a 3-car garage to a home with none of those things and expect to get a similar price per square foot. These are the things we take into account when I do a price analysis for a listing, which I'm not going to do right now, honestly, because there isn't enough inventory with enough detail to make a strong case. I could only find one house that was 2,300 square feet, but hopefully this analysis helps you see that there's more to value fluctuations than meets the eye. Now let's look at which towns had competing offers, and then I'm going to share one caveat to all of this information. The absolute most competitive towns with more than 30% of listings getting multiple offers were in order from most to least competitive: Cary, Morrisville, Durham, Chapel Hill, and Raleigh. Apex and Holly Springs were moderately competitive with 20 and 25% of listings receiving competing offers. Wake Forest had 15%, Wendell had 13%, Clayton had 11%, both Fuquay and Garner had 10%, and Zebulon, again our outlier, had 9% of listings receive competitive offers. And here's the caveat: the market is always changing. The data I've presented is from May of this year. This week, as this video was in production, I've experienced or had realtor friends experience some situations in the market that leads me to believe it's getting more competitive. Now, these situations are ongoing, so I'm not going to give specifics, but in one situation, an offer with $100,000 due diligence deposit was rejected because it wasn't the best offer, and in another case, an offer was made that was $100,000 over list price. It does feel like things are heating up a bit, but I don't think this is the norm still, and there are definitely still ways to get into the market and stay away from situations like this, which were definitely the norm last year. I've got a full market report that I'm glad to share with you if it would be helpful. It has the months of supply for each town, the days on the market for each town, the number of showings per listing for each town, and a few other interesting data points. If you would like a copy of it so you can look more closely, there's a link in the comments to get it. If you like this video, you'll probably also like this one about how Cary had some totally crazy things happening in their property values, and I debunked some people's ideas about what that meant.